It's come to my attention in light of recent events that we are drinking far too little peated Irish whiskey. Let's change that. Let's drink some peated whiskey. Welcome to Whisky and Whisky. I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian, and I don't review Irish whiskey, I drink it, and you get my thoughts. You're welcome. Once again, coming from the home of whiskey and whiskey, Christy's bar, shout out to the lads here for letting me wreck their heads and take over their pub for a few hours each week to bring you the best and all that Irish whiskey has to offer. So I said at the start that in light of recent events, we were going to be trying some peated whiskey today. And that event was actually held a few weeks back on this channel. It was an online live tasting that was a journey into peated Irish whiskey with two other friends of mine that know far more about peated whiskey than I do. This got me thinking. I don't drink enough peated whiskey on this channel. I don't know enough about the history of peated whiskey in Ireland. And perhaps there might be a few peated whiskey fans that are a little bit curious about what the Irish peated offerings are like. And so here we are. And why not do it with a special limited bottling? This is the limited edition Red Silkie from Sliabh Liag distillery. They call it the legendary Red Silkie. Before I jump into the detail on the brand and the whiskey, first let me give you a very brief overview, about the history of peat and Irish whiskey. For the uninitiated, you may be asking yourself, what the hell is peat? Well, peat, or turf as it's commonly referred to as in Ireland, is at its very basic a fuel. It's a flammable soil made up of layers of organic sediment that has been compressed over thousands of years and is still very much used today as kindling for many a fireplace in Ireland. Irish whiskey is not typically renowned for being peated as much as possibly Scotch may be. However, historically, majority of distilleries outside of major cities have relied heavily on peat to dry out their malted grains. And when I say historically, I'm referring to a period pre-1800s-ish, before the majority of waterways and canals were really developed in Ireland. Peat was typically taken from the Midlands where there was an abundance. However, it was a tedious and very cumbersome process to get the turf back to some of the market town distillers in far off areas. Peat is then burned to heat a kiln, which then produces an especially aromatic smoke. To a point, this smoke has a considerable influence on barley during kilning, imbuing it with compounds called phenols. Typical flavors generally would include tar, ash, iodine, and smoke. Due to a lack of alternative fuel sources at the time, whiskies using entirely peated barley were once the mainstay of the industry. As other fuel sources became more available though, and cheaper, the use of peat dried malt was only being used in some isolated distilleries and mostly all poaching makers up until roughly the 19th century. More on that in a second. So while Irish whiskey may not be renowned for peated whiskey, historically it played a very large role in the development and growth of the Irish whiskey industry. Today we're looking at a brand that has set up shop in one of the most famous areas of Ireland, and historically a powerhouse for poaching development. Sliabh Liag's home is based in County Donegal in the northwest of Ireland. With a new distillery currently under construction and due to start distilling in the autumn of 2021, it marks the first time in 177 years that a distilling company has returned to the region. Donegal is steeped in history of legal and illegal distillation, and Sliabh Liag's peninsula was amongst the most prolific poaching producing areas in the county. Aeneas Coffey referred to distilling in the mountainous parts of Donegal as being where illicit distillation has been carried on from time immemorial and been the principal occupation of almost the whole population. I robbed that from Sliabh Liag's website. The distillery was an initial dream of husband and wife duo James and Moira Doherty, who set out to build upon that dream in 2014. Jump forward to December of 2019, with a ton of hardship behind them and some new members and investors on board, that dream became a reality with the soil being turned on their Ardara site 20 minutes away from the current operations in Carrick, County Donegal. I'll leave a link below to their website and you can have a read just yourself of just how much effort and time and the struggles they've put in to get the distillery off the ground. It is really an interesting read and I'd highly recommend it. Right, so there's plenty more information that you can read on the website. I'm not trying to leave anything out, but it's a very broad overview of the history of peat, distilling in Donegal, and the people behind the business. And like I said, there's plenty more to say, but in the essence of time, I'm gonna have to move on. Before we get down to business, give me a thumbs up if you like that bit of history, and of course, subscribe if you haven't already. Right, so let's get down to the main business of the day and get the Red Silkie in the glass, and I can talk talk you through the whiskey. I think after all that information that I gave you, I'm really due a nice strong pour for myself. All right, my lovely Tua glass this time. The legendary Silkie was first released in 2016 and their dark Silkie later on in 2020, and this is their third iteration, the legendary red Silkie. It's the same makeup as the dark Silkie, only that it's kind of finished a little bit differently. And just as a side note, the Silkie is named after the Silkies of Donegal coast. Silkies are mermaid-like mythical shapeshifters who shed their seal skin coats on a sandy, moonlit shore to become beautiful sea maidens. Also, I robbed that off the website. The entire range is currently sourced whiskies that are bottled by Sliabh Liag while they await their current distillery to be finished. This is a 46% ABV non-chill filtered blended whiskey, the makeup of which is 15% double distilled single malt finished in bourbon casks, 13% triple distilled single malt finished in sherry casks, 2% triple distilled peated single malt at 55 parts per million, and 70% grain whiskey finished in rechar casks. That's a mouthful. 55% of the blend is then finished for 4 months in Ribera del Duero casks, while 45% is finished for 5 months in Rioja casks. The reason this was done was to honor Donegal's most famous nobleman, Red Hugh O'Donnell. O'Donnell left Donegal in 1602 to travel to Spain to secure the support of King Philip in a bid to reclaim his lands in Ireland. Hugh died in Simanacas, near the Ribera del Duero wine region of Spain, before he could return to Donegal with his army. This is limited to 1,100 bottles, and at the time of this video, it's still available for about €45, which is about $55. While Sliabh Liag is currently awaiting their main Ardara distillery to be finished, which should be around the autumn of this year, all going well and no more delays due to COVID, they have laid down some of their own single malt in July of 2020 in their smaller Carrick distillery. They basically used a 500-litre copper pot still and were able to lay down small amounts of peated single malt using peat from the area and barley from Irish craft malts. And genuinely, I think that's enough information now. We need to get this whiskey into my mouth and we do some notes. As I said, 46% ABV non-chill filtered, peated blended whiskey, and on the nose straight away, you really do get that lovely light smoke and you know, a nice hint of like strawberry sweetness to it. The smoke is not overpowering, it's kind of subtle, it blends in quite well. And there's also this kind of floral note behind it. And there's a wooden spice, or there's some type of wood there that I wouldn't normally, or wouldn't really be familiar with. The smoke adds a nice depth of character to it. There's a touch of apple peel also, and a little bit hint of a distillate. I'm not sure what the age statement on this, it's a non-age statement, but there's literally only one thing left to do, and that's just to get it into the palate now at this stage, and we've talked for ages, so I'm excited for this. I'm trying to open my mind up more to more peated whiskeys after the last tasting I did, which was the whole experimenting with peated. Like I said, let's just get into the palate. Sláinte. Wow. Lovely sweetness from the berries, from the strawberries, an oakiness. There's a lovely wine note to it. I'm not entirely sure exactly what it is, but there's also this pleasant dryness and like almost a touch of a medicinal note from the smoke. As I said before, it's nicely balanced and dry. The dryness kind of takes over a little bit on the finish from the sweetness, but it is quite fruity as well. Yeah, it's really good. Really well balanced. The kind of dryness is taken over more now from the actual sweetness, but it's well balanced. There's nothing out of place there. You're breaking it down into its different kind of flavors and flavor profiles. Yeah, you're getting the sweetness, you're getting the oakiness, you're getting the smoke, which is light. It's not overpowering by any means, but it's that dryness that takes over from the sweetness that I'm really kind of actually partial to. It's really more fruity than anything else. It is very good. Oh, back into the palate. That finish, lovely and sweet. Nicely dry, plenty of fruit. You know, that little bit of spice and fruit and dryness is still lingering. Still getting the touch, the hints of oak. The smoke, like I said, is not in your face. It's actually quite pleasant. It comes across well balanced with everything else. It's very morsome. That's a morsome type of whiskey. I like that, you know, and it's amazing me how much lately I'm really getting into more and more peated whiskey. You know what, I think that's a great example of lightly peated Irish whiskey, not too in your face, but tons of character. I did try the legendary dark Silkie, like I said, a few weeks ago in an online tasting. I'll leave a card to it here, and even though it's the same blend, that finish really brightens the whiskey with the fruit and the wine notes. Really delicious. And the more peated whiskeys like this I get to try, the more I'm actually falling in love with them. And, you know, it's just smashing, and I'm absolutely exhausted after all of that information that I've given you. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the legendary red Silkie. If you had it yourself, I'd love to know your thoughts on it below. Leave me a comment and tell me, did you actually get any of the notes that I did? If the future of peated Irish whiskey is anything to go by from this whiskey, then you know what, we're really heading in the right direction. I'm fortunate enough to be able to try whiskeys like this, and they absolutely blow my mind. I mean, the hope is here that more peated whiskeys are going to come online in the near future. Moving forward, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to dedicate one show a month specifically to peated Irish whiskies, or maybe even do like a different peated whiskey tasting on a different day or something like that, because these need to have their voices heard. And lucky enough, there's a lot more coming out very shortly. I just may be able to make that happen. Before I go, a massive thanks to the lads here at Christy's for helping me out as always. Do keep an eye on the blog for some big news coming in the next few weeks. I can't exactly say anything more than that at the minute, but I'll leave my social links down below so you can click on it and check it out and keep up to date. I'm gonna have to leave you on that cliffhanger and talk to you all next week. Until then, stay safe, stay drinking Irish, and stay hydrated. Talk to you soon. Sláinte.